Okay, so we are back to Tanya in real life. And what we're doing today is an overview of chapters 18 through 25, because I realize that it's too exciting to, it's too important to leave for just a few weeks in the middle of a topic. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit of what we did last week. In the entire beginning of the Tanya, we learned how to be a Beinoni, mostly through the power of changing our minds. And the more we learned that the more we value Hashem, the more we come to value Hashem, the more we will naturally want to be aligned with Hashem in our choices and our behavior, including in our conscious thoughts, right? Our mind controls our bodies. So eventually our minds can even change our emotions. Meaning when we say our mind controls our bodies, means if something is unthinkable in our minds, we won't be able to do it. So by changing our minds and becoming clear in our minds, we really change so much. And when we move through the process of Chachma, Bina, and Das, we can take the idea of from knowing Hashem on a superficial, intellectual, cold, removed knowing to a deeply internalized knowing it in our bones. Chachma is when we learn about Hashem intellectually. Bina, in other words, on the first level of consciousness, just that superficial level of knowing, learning, exploring. Bina is when we reflect, we connect, we meditate, we explore more deeply, we form a personal connection with the ideas. We actually, really hash it out, take a look at what, look at it from all angles. That's meditation. That's where we begin to generate emotions. But then Das is when we secure those emotions and we prevent ourselves from losing that security and that connection. And what is that? Das is when we allow that idea to penetrate our deeper consciousness. It's when we resist our inner resistance to those ideas. It's when we become aware of the subconscious resistance that we have to Hashem's greatness, to our thoughts, and the ideas that we have about Hashem's greatness, and we resist them. We move through them and we allow Hashem's truth to come out on top, to come out the winner. We let go of, we consciously decide that ideas that contradict Hashem's reality they don't belong to us. They're not our personal truth. So Das completes that process of integrating all that we know of Hashem's greatness into our actual reality, our personal reality. And through this work that we discussed from chapter 1 through chapter 17, through this work, through this process, we become aligned with Hashem's reality, not just in our behaviors, but in our mindset and even in our instinctive responses, because we're changing ourselves on a very deep level. And this process is fail-proof. It always works. It necessarily impacts change. Or scientifically, I think it's also aligned with current, what's out there in science, although science changes, and this hasn't changed in the last 250 years. We could change on a very deep level, right? It's a process, it's fail-proof, and it's also how we can understand the Torah's words that tell us, that it's very close to us. It's very possible for each of us to be absolutely aligned with Hashem's truth, with Hashem's reality in our minds, in our hearts, and in our actions. And yet this process takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of brain exercise. And a lot of us, it's nice to say it's close. Yeah, it's fail-proof, but it's a long process. So last week in chapter 18, we learned that the Baal Tanya says there has to be a quicker way. There has to be a shorter way. There has to be something that's more accessible, because it's called, the Torah tells us, Kikarev elecha hadavar me'od. The word me'od means very. It's increasingly, it's intensely very close to us, very accessible. That whole long process we just described, really working through Chachma Bina Das, and again and again and again, rewiring our brain and our all the many layers of our consciousness, one choice at a time, one moment at a time, one situation at a time. That's a long-term process. And the Torah tells us, it's a very, very close, very accessible process. So in chapter 18, the Baal Tanya says there's got to be a quicker way. There's got to be a quicker way. And from chapter 18 through 25, we learn that quicker way. Through the process of Chachma Bina Das, we become aligned with Hashem's reality and we're empowered to show up with our neshama shining forth. And there's another way to get this exact result. There's another way to get this absolute alignment. What's the quicker way? The quicker way is our Ahava Misuteres. That's the 2-word answer. Our inherent hidden love for Hashem that we started learning about last week. Just like we have an instinctive fight or flight response that is triggered as soon as our brain decides something is dangerous. And obviously this is even in our subconscious. When we hear something that our subconscious determines is dangerous, our body moves into unstoppable protection. Like it's going to protect us at all costs, no matter what. Not in a way of thinking, not in a way that defies logic and our rational minds. We have, just like we have that fight or flight instinct, that fight or flight impulse, so too we have a instinctive stay true to Hashem impulse. We have an instinctive love for Hashem. The Baal Tanya calls it an Ava Misuteres. And each and every one of us has it, just like each and every one of us, part of the science of our physical brain is that fight or flight instinct. The science of our neshama is our Ava Misuteres. And so for each and every one of us, trusting in Hashem, recognizing Hashem's power in our lives, and all that it comes with, the security that it brings, the attachment, the connection, the belonging, the trust, the goodness, the value, the dignity, the worthiness, the courage, all of that, our beauty, is not something we need to think about. It's not just something we need to think about in our consciousness. It's already programmed into our subconsciousness. It's not something that we have to bring into ourselves from the outside in or from the top, from the most superficial layer of ourselves inward. It's something also inward that we need to learn how to shine outward. It's already there. It's part of us just by virtue of having a Jewish soul, a neshama. Sorry. It's in the chachma of our neshama, the deepest part of our neshama, the part of our neshama that is beyond logic and reason, hardwired into our system. What does this hidden love look like when it's activated? We learned last week. It looks like unstoppable courage and commitment to Hashem, a courage and commitment that defies logic and reason because it's so much bigger and deeper, more profound than anything we could think in our minds. And one of my children says, "I love you more than people could say and more than people could think." You know, like it's bigger than words. Words are a parameter. This is bigger than any parameters, and it's even more than the words. Thoughts are also words. Thoughts are words that we say to ourselves in our own minds, right? So it's even bigger than thoughts. But what activates this? What activates this instinctive love for Hashem? Like our instinctive, our physical danger, our fight or flight instinct is activated by danger, right? So too, when our body or our subconscious brain senses spiritual danger, our inherent love for Hashem gets activated. And what that looks like is unstoppable courage and commitment to protect our relationship with Hashem, our relationship with our neshama, our relationship with our Jewish soul. And this explains why and how it could be that even someone who lived a life of complete ignorance of Hashem, complete no observance of Torah, no learning Torah, no observance of mitzvahs, even such a person in such a situation will be willing to endure great hardship and even torture or death to stay true to Hashem. Last week we talked about the New York City cab driver who said, "I keep nothing of Torah, I eat on purpose on Yom Kippur because I like to." And yet when he was asked, "Would you give up your Judaism?" he said a very definite, very passionate, "Absolutely not. No way, nothing to talk about." And he said, if I had to, if it came to that, I would be the very, very first person to jump into any fire, but I would never, never deny my Jewish faith. I would never deny my relationship with Hashem. So today, we're going to learn what happens to this part of us all the time. If we have this love for Hashem that gives us a truly unstoppable courage and commitment to stay true to Hashem, to protect our relationship with our neshama and with Hashem, where is it all the time? And how can we activate it even when we're not in physical danger or intense emotional danger? How can we activate it when we're not choosing between jumping into the fire and doing, and maintaining our faith? When we're not in that, really push comes to shove moment, how can we live with that? How can we activate that? There's got to be a shortcut, right? So I thought we were going to do, chapter 19, but because we're not going to be learning for the next few weeks, instead, I want to do an overview of all of this. And Amir Tashem, when we reconnect in a couple of weeks, we'll go into in depth in chapter 19. But here's an analogy that might be helpful. And I shared this, we talked about it, for those of you who were with us last night, we talked about it last night, and also it's in the book. If I want to go uptown New York, there's a train that I could take, the number 3 train, the number 4 train, the F train, the Q. There are different trains that take me uptown New York. Okay, so if I'm sitting on the train and I get onto the train that I want to go uptown, okay, but by mistake, I go on the train that's going downtown, not uptown. If I look out the window as a resident of New York City, I know, and as somebody who's familiar with the route that goes both uptown and downtown, if I look out the window and I notice that I'm going downtown, what happens? I immediately get up and I walk out of the train at the next stop, and I change trains back in the direction I want to go. But what happens if I am going on the train, okay, and I'm not familiar with the street signs. So I look out the window and I see all the signs that should be telling me I'm going in the wrong direction, but they're not telling me that I'm going in the wrong direction. Why? Because I don't know. I don't know how to read those signs. They're not familiar to me. They're unknown to me. So what's going to help me? What's going to help me get up and change? If somebody tells me, or let's say if I hear a recording that says this train is going downtown, this train is going downtown. And if I hear that, oh, this train is going downtown, boom, I'm going to jump up and I'm going to get off of that train because I don't want to be going downtown. I want to be going uptown. I'm going to jump up and jump into action to get to where I want to go. And to do this, we did not need any meditation. We did not need any thought process. There was no thinking, analyzing, exploring, expounding, meditating, personally connection. Do I like the train? Do I not like the train? Is it good to go uptown? Is it bad to go uptown? Do a lot of people go uptown? Do a lot of people? It doesn't matter. None of that matters. I want to go uptown, not downtown. That's what I already decided I want to, and it's not up for discussion. It's not negotiable. The minute I become aware that this train is taking me in the opposite direction of where I want to go, I'm going to jump into action. I don't need to analyze it. I don't need to explore it. I already did. So in these chapters, the Baal Tanya is giving us awareness of what our innermost desires are. This is the map of where our soul wants to be. In chapter 19, the Baal Tanya describes at length, and this is where we get the visual of that, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, that our soul, our neshama, we have that visual imagery of a flame, because the Baal Tanya points out in this chapter how this, just like a flame, yearns to go upward and yearns to be incorporated within the ultimate source of fire. And it denies, you see, all kinds of love. Whenever we love something or someone, what we really love is ourselves. When I say I love ice cream, it's because I love the taste of ice cream on my tongue or in my going down my throat, right? You know that the famous joke of the guy the fish, who the salmon, right, who was swimming in the ocean and was caught by the fishermen. And he heard the fisherman say, oh, well, we're going to bring this to the guy who loves salmon. So he's like, okay, great. At least I'm going to a guy who loves salmon. I'm going to be pampered. I'm going to be put into a good, a nice big fish tank. I'm going to get good food. I'm going to be well taken care of. He loves fish. But of course, what that fisherman meant is that this person loves to eat fish, not to keep fish, not to protect fish, but to eat the fish, right? So when we love people, what we really like is what we really mean is I love being around that person. I love having that person in my life. I love the blessing that they bring to my life. I love the sunshine that they are in this world, right? So it's always that there's an end game that has some sort of benefit to us, even unconditional love. When we love somebody unconditionally, it's because we're unconditionally connected. If I love my daughter, it's not because I'm getting something from her, but it's because she's attached, she's connected, she's my daughter. What do you mean? She's my daughter, she's mine. She's part of me, and we love ourselves, right? So all love in our lives always comes back to ourselves. But the love that we have for Hashem, that's embedded into our spiritual DNA, in our physical bodies, is different from all of that. This love is almost like a self-destructive love, not a self-producing, a self-perpetuating love. Because a fire, when you see a flame, I was thinking that if we do this chapter, I would actually put a flame on the camera so we can look at it. But then I was thinking we're going to skip this, but I want to just do it as a taste of what we're talking about, what awareness looks like. Okay, a flame has this flickering dance that it constantly does. If you look at a flame, it looks like it's jumping off the wick. It looks like it wants to remove itself from the wick, and it does. And it does. It has this desire. Even if you turn the flame, if you take a candle and you point it down, the flame goes up. It will go right onto your hand. Don't try it, right? The flame goes up. The flame always wants to go up. Now, a flame, when it's on a candle, it has an existence. It has an entity. It's a flame. It's doing something. It's bringing light to this very room. But if the flame actually does go up and is incorporated in the source of fire under the sun, it has no existence. It no longer exists because its whole existence is in its separateness from the source. The minute when a flame is part of the grand light, the source of all light, the source of all fire, not a flame. It's nothing. It's part of the bigger whole. It's part of that big, glorious, huge, flaming fire. And the Baal Tanya says, so too, our neshama is one with Hashem, and it wants to separate itself from the body. But in the body, it has an identity. My neshama is Shterna Sarah Bas Rachel. Your neshama is your name, Bas, your mother's name, has an identity, has an existence. And that very name is, in a certain sense, its separateness. Just by existing, that existence, at least in our minds, is separate from Hashem. But once the neshama goes up to its source and is reincorporated into Hashem's light, it's losing its separateness. It's no longer an individual soul. It's now just Hashem. It's losing its separate identity, separate existence. Obviously, this is not when a neshama passes away and it does ascend to heaven, it maintains its separateness. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the soul's deepest desire to remove itself from all limitations, from all physical confinement, from all separateness, and be one with Hashem, even at the cost of losing its separate, its identity, because the whole identity is a separation. So that's what the Baal Tanya tells us in chapter 19, right? So when we learn this and we think about it, and this is what our neshama is, this is what our neshama wants. So now we have an awareness. It's like we turn on the light of, hey, There's a part of me that wants to go uptown. There's a part of me that wants absolute oneness with Hashem. Well, now I know what that looks like. Now I know what that, and knowing what that looks like, I'll have more clarity of what it looks like when I'm going downtown. If I'm familiar with what the street signs are to go uptown, when I see a sign that's not part of that, I know right away I'm going downtown. And so the more we know of what our neshama looks like, the more we know about what our Ava Misuteres looks like, that awareness itself awakens our consciousness and makes it more alive and active as an active force in our conscious selves. So now let's go back to that was just, that's what's in chapter 19. The overall picture of what these chapters are, 19 through 25, 18 through 25, is the Baal Tanya is giving us that awareness of what our innermost desires. And since this awareness is already hardwired, since these facts, he's turning on the light of what is already in our system, right? My neshama wants Hashem, not because I'm meditating, not because I'm exploring, not because I'm thinking about Hashem, but because this is who I am. This is my spiritual being. This is my lot. This is me. This is my soul. This is what I want even before I was born. This is who we are. This is what it looks like when we are going in the direction we want to be going. And this is the opposite of what it looks like. And with this awareness, since it's already part of how we are hardwired, we don't need a lengthy meditation process to create change. All we need to do is turn on the light of awareness. Just like the person sitting on the train, once they know they want to go uptown, if they don't know where they want to go and they're confused, maybe I should go uptown, maybe I should go downtown, maybe I belong here, maybe I belong there, I'm not sure which train to take. Then, okay, you're going uptown, fine, I'll go uptown. Oh, it's downtown, fine, no problem, I'll go downtown. They don't really care where they're going. But if we know very certainly where we want to go, then awareness is everything. And so that's what the Baal Tanya is giving us in these chapters. But what I would like to do today is I want to bring all of this to the language we have been using throughout this series, the language of mental health and emotional wellness. Because we've talked about how when we are criticized, blamed, condemned, all of our thinking, our rational brain goes out the window, right? We get into our amygdala, our primitive brain, our reptilian brain, our subconscious instinct, fight or flight mode, whatever we want to call it. There's so many different terms. We're not in our conscious thoughts. We're not in that mode of I am in charge of myself. We are overwhelmed by our instinctive nature. And we go into, we don't do that process of slowing down, noticing what's going on and making a conscious, rational decision. We act from the place of our body's instinctive reactions. By myself, with myself, for myself, and not by Hashem, with Hashem, and for Hashem. But through the process of Chachma, Bina, and Das that we talked about before, we can slowly not only control our behavior, like what they call white knuckling it, but we can even change our instinctive response systems. We can rewire our brains slowly over time. And yet, what about right today, here and now? What if I never did that process? What if I'm not the type of person who's going to do that lengthy, mindful process? So there's a different way, and that's what we're talking about now. Our childhood experiences taught our bodies how to wake up our inherent fight or flight amygdala response to all kinds of situations, right? Our childhood experiences taught our bodies this, right? Our bodies respond to triggers that we took on through our traumatic experiences in our past, in our childhood, or even as adults. And what that looks like is that there was a dangerous situation, and that was unsafe. And now our subconscious mind is going to interpret what we're experiencing now as if it's that dangerous situations. Okay, when our body is responding to a trigger that's in our subconscious brain, there's no conscious conversation between our bodies and our minds. It's all subconscious, right? Our subconscious mind interprets something as being dangerous, and immediately our body puts us into fight or flight mode, right? That's the way our bodies are designed to work, that when we sense danger, we're gonna go into fight or flight mode. So as a result of our past experiences, we're gonna go into fight or flight mode even when there's no danger. And I wanna use certain words because I'm gonna use these words because that's how we'll understand and appreciate what we have on the spiritual side, that parallels this instinct. This is a dysfunction of our fight or flight instinct, and we all have it, right? What it looks like is that instead of reserving our fight or flight instinct for active danger, we activate it even when there is no danger. So we have an active danger response to perfectly safe situations. We have an active danger response to perfectly safe situations. For example, as an adult, I know what we all know, that difficult emotions or unpleasant emotions are not bad, not dangerous. They're just difficult. They're unpleasant, but they're not dangerous. We call them negative, but they're not negative. They're simply information alerting us, and now we have to make a choice. Okay? Emotions are alerts to us that we have to make a choice. There's something that needs to happen now, and we have to decide what that is going to be. So emotions, whatever they are just data. They're just an envelope of information that's telling us something, alerting us that we want to explore what's going on so that we could make a conscious decision. So difficult emotions are not dangerous. They're just difficult, right? But me, when I am faced with uncomfortable emotions, difficult emotions, my brain says, my subconscious brain says, run away, hide as fast as you could, as hard as you could. Get out of here immediately. That's what my instinctive brain, that's how my instinctive brain interprets difficult emotions. And that is exactly what my body does, or what my body used to do. It's a dysfunction of my nervous system. It's a dysfunction of my fight or flight instinct. And to use the words we used before, it's an active danger response to a perfectly safe situation. An active danger response to a perfectly safe situation. And for many years, I did not even realize that this was going on for me until recently. But once we realize what triggers us and what our instinctive response is to that trigger, we could slow down and we could change our response to that trigger. So I know now that when my body gets unpleasant emotions, my subconscious brain interprets that as dangerous, and it puts me right away to run away. And so now that I know this, when I see myself running away, I could slow down and I could do something else. I could change my response to that trigger. And every time we change our behavior, we change our response to that trigger, we're creating a new neural pathway and taking the steam out of that trigger a little bit more, a little bit at a time. We can take the steam out of that trigger, take the energy, the impact, the power of that trigger, so that we can have ultimately what we want to have is a non-active danger response, a safe response to a safe situation. All of this that I'm talking about is work that we're all familiar with it. We talked about it before. We've referenced this in the past, right? It's an overactive amygdala, a hyperactive fight or flight instinct. I called it in the book a hyperactive fight or flight instinct. Now there's another piece to this puzzle of triggers and traumas. There's another whole piece to this puzzle. And we talked about a hyperactive amygdala, or hyperactive fight or flight response, and what that looks like is an active danger response to a safe situation. But there's another opposite, okay? What if we have an underactive amygdala? What about when we have a non-reactive fight or flight instinct. This is something that most people don't talk about, but it's very, very impactful. And I think this is what the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, is talking about. It's a totally different possibility. Let's say a person grows up in complete dysfunction. Okay, there's regular abuse, there's regular dysfunction, there's regular neglect, it's the complete dysfunction. Now that person may decide that dysfunction or certain dysfunctional behaviors are actually normal. They might decide that yelling at a person is how you talk. It's how you communicate effectively. It's how you get your message across. If you want to be understood, if you want to be heard, you actually need to yell. So when that person is yelled at, they don't go into fight or flight mode. They don't think it's unsafe. Their subconscious brain does not interpret yelling as an unsafe situation. They probably don't love it, but they don't have that instinctive run away, fight or flight, kill somebody, reaction to it. If a person decides that yelling at another person is normal, then when someone yells at them, they don't get triggered, it's fine. And then they don't do anything to help themselves at that point, unless or until it escalates. So for the purpose of this conversation, I'm going to call that a non-active danger response to a dangerous situation, right? We talked about before an active danger response to a non-dangerous situation or to a safe situation. What we're talking about now is a non-active danger. I'm acting as if it's safe when it's actually unsafe. It's backwards. Usually our trauma causes us to have an active danger response to non-dangerous situations, right? But it can also cause us to tolerate the intolerable. It can also cause us to act as if we are safe when we are actually unsafe. It could cause us to decide that there is no danger when there actually is a danger. Now, all of this can help us appreciate our Ahava Mesuteres, our hidden natural love for Hashem, our instinctive, unstoppable courage and commitment. In chapter 18 last week, the Baal Tanya told us that our neshama has that instinctive love for Hashem, right? That is expressed as unstoppable courage and commitment. We'll do anything, anywhere, anytime to protect our relationship with Hashem. We'll even endure great suffering. We'll choose death rather than defy our faith. So the question is, why is our instinctive love sleeping? And in this parak, in chapter 19, the Baal Tanya talks about that it is sleeping. And it's very interesting because he says the impact of it is in exile, meaning the unstoppable courage and commitment is in exile, but the quality itself is sleeping. And in learning about this more, Rabbi Yoel Khan explains that, that there's a difference between the exile and the sleeping. Exile means it's dominated by something else. It's under someone else's control. Whereas something is sleeping, it can easily be awakened. It's still within our control. Exile means it's captured. Something else is covering it up. It's concealed. In other words, it's a trigger that's turned inside out and is non-activatable unless we go through a process. But sleeping we can wake up, and that's in our control to wake up. We will wake up when someone calls our name, when someone pushes us. We're gonna wake up, and we were never held captive by something else. So that's just a side point. Why is our instinctive love why is it sleeping? Why is it not active? Why is it that when I am faced with a difficult decision, or when I am shaming myself in my brain, or when I am, doing something that's spiritually toxic for me, I don't have the unstoppable courage and commitment to stop. I don't have that courage to endure the discomfort that it takes to stop and turn the other way and defy, and defy myself in that, my other self in that moment. I don't have the courage to stay true to my desire. Why? And the answer is because we have de-triggered ourselves. We have de-triggered ourselves, or life has de-triggered us. Our childhood has de-triggered us. Our past has de-triggered us. We have told ourselves that spiritual dysfunction is normal. We've tolerated the intolerable, right? Gullus is intolerable. It's an intolerable situation. What do you mean? I should be away from my father for so many years? We should be away from Hashem for so many years? What is this? It's intolerable. The disconnect that we experience, that sense of aloneness, we're lonely, without Hashem's presence. And we decide it's normal. We tell ourselves stories as if Hashem is not in the room, and nobody, like, it's normal. It's normal to do that. Spiritual dysfunction is accepted as normal. We've made spiritual dysfunction acceptable and tolerable. And with that, we've de-triggered ourselves. We've deactivated as a society, as just a fact of being in Gullus. Not because we want to, not because I woke up one morning and said, I want to unplug my spiritual energy. No, none of us did that. But over time, the generations, the world around us, society at large, and just the fact that we are in Gullus, just the fact that we have this human experience and we live the way we do, spiritual dysfunction has become normal in our minds and even in our subconscious minds. We have decided that spiritual toxicity is not bad. It's actually not toxic. You got to get with the program. You have to be real. You have to live in the world, right? For example, we've talked a lot about how shame is spiritually toxic because it's the opposite of empowerment. Hashem says, when we wake up in the morning, Hashem says, I am giving you a part of me to carry and be carried by it. Wherever you go, whatever you do, go shine, go live, go make a difference. Go be a carrier of light and goodness and love and compassion and dignity to wherever you go today, to wherever you find yourself, to wherever I send you today. But our shame pipes up and says, actually, you're not that good. Actually, you don't really matter. Actually, you can't. Actually, there's this person who's going to roll their eyes if you say what you want to say. And that fear that's actually very, a dead end and all that stuff. But we look at it, right? Shame is the number one destroyer of our capacity. That's what we wake up with. The opposite of our empowerment, our disempowerment, our shame, our helplessness, our self-pity, all of that stuff is so destructive. It's spiritually toxic, right? But many of us believe deeply that not only is shame a spiritually safe behavior, it is actually, not only is it not unholy, it is holy. So when we are shaming ourselves, which is a spiritually unsafe, abusive, toxic behavior that we do to ourselves, our subconscious brain, part of us believes that not only is it okay, but it's holy, it's good, it's important. And with that, it's like putting on a sound machine so that our Ava Mesuteres, our natural love for Hashem, could sleep very comfortably. It could rest in peace. I didn't mean it in that way. It doesn't die. It never dies. But it could rest in peace. It's never going to be triggered. It's never going to be triggered. So what we have to do, so our work is to trigger it, to re-trigger it, to teach our bodies how to wake up our inherent, stay true to Hashem, neshama response to all kinds of situations. How do we teach our bodies? By increasing our awareness. In the next couple of chapters, one of the big ideas that the Tanya introduces, which is earth-shattering in its profound impact, is that which my father could have told the cab driver, which we want to tell ourselves, is that in the moment, right? You would go into a fire to protect your relationship with Hashem. Let me tell you something. When you are shaming yourself, you're actually denying Hashem's truth. When you are doing anything that is not in alignment with Hashem, we're negating Hashem's truth. And that huge idea. If the minute we throw out we stop normalizing spiritual toxicity, we stop normalizing spiritual dysfunction, when we decide that we will no longer tolerate spiritual abuse, spiritual dysfunction, spiritual toxicity, that changes us. That makes us totally sensitive to, that wakes up our natural love for Hashem, and it activates our unstoppable courage and commitment. Just like when that person who's so used to yelling that that's their only language of communication, when that person learns that actually yelling is dangerous, it's unsafe, it's emotionally toxic, don't do it, right? All of a sudden, when they actually believe that and they start to change and they act accordingly, then when someone yells at them, all of a sudden, then they feel unsafe, then they're triggered. That's how they could restabilize, reactivate their healthy fight or flight instinct, so that when we are in a dangerous situation, we respond as if we're in danger. So those are my thoughts on the Ava Mesutaris, and let's start praying about it a little before we conclude. I know that this was very heavy, very intense. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Okay, so someone's asking a question, and it's a good, I'm going to combine two questions, and it's a very good question. Somebody wrote, I think everyone on this Zoom does not tolerate spiritual dysfunction. And someone else said, being in Gullus is not in our control, even if we want it to be intolerable. So I think that for me, let's say, right, having a dysfunctional reaction to emotions, as I learn and as I grow, I look back at yesterday and I see that yesterday was dysfunctional compared to today. And I think that everyone could relate. When we're growing and we're in that mode of growing, we're doing the best we can, but very often we look back at where we were even just 2 weeks ago, and we're like, in comparison to today, 2 weeks ago, I was in the dumps, right? Compared to the level of goodness that I have right now. And yes, there are dips and we have our ups and downs. And I'm talking about in the bigger picture, in the trajectory of our growth. We can always look back, if we're continuing to grow, we can always look back and say that what I thought was free and empowered is so different today than when I thought about it 2 years ago. So, and I think the same thing applies to spiritual dysfunction. Yes, every single person on this Zoom is aware of spiritual dysfunction, but spiritual alignment is so big. It's such a huge idea that as we grow in our spiritual health, we always can look back and say, well, compared to where I am today, yesterday was limited. Yesterday was stuck compared to the awareness and the insight and the empowerment that we have today. Just like we could experience that emotionally, we also experience that spiritually. And these chapters of Tanya are all about awareness, like really upgrading our awareness of what spiritual, quote unquote, functionality looks like, to help us upgrade our awareness, to help us grow, so we have what to aspire to and what to reach for. What you're saying is that it seems like the whole world is spiritually dysfunctional because we are, as a society, we're desensitized to so many things that are really maybe wrong. Mm-hmm. But I want to put not maybe wrong, but definitely wrong. But I want to put it in perspective for a minute, and from a Geula perspective. My personal understanding is, we used to think that we could rely on certain systems to keep us safe. In the subconsciousness of my mind, I had a very clear separation between my grandparents' life and my life, where I am in a secure situation and I don't need to actively depend on Hashem. As I'm saying this, it's like, it sounds ridiculous, but I think as a society, we all thought like in America is different. We are safe, we're secure, we're going to be protected, we're going to be taken care of, and we don't need the miracle. You know that story of the guy who's looking for parking and he says, God, I really need parking. If you send me parking, I promise to donate $50 to charity. And as he finishes his little prayer, a parking place opens up and he says, oh God, forget it. I don't need you. I found it on my own. You know, like, so we were like that. You know, I remember when I was in the hospital before one of my children were born, I had a little complication, which Baruch Hashem turned out to be fine. My daughter told her teacher or her principal that her mother's in the hospital. She said, like, we need to say Tehillim for her, you know? And I thought, wait, we need to say Tehillim for every person. Is there really a place where now we need to pray for this person and now we don't? But of course, when someone's in a dangerous situation, all of a sudden now we are aware that their life is a miracle. But really, every time we walk out of our house and we come back home safely, it's a miracle that we didn't get hit by a car. It's a miracle that we didn't trip over 3 things along. Everything is a miracle. And I think that now, with the falling apart of our systems and our sense of security, there's actually a more spiritual health. It feels very, very frightening. And yet, now we're aware that we have nothing to lean on and nobody to rely on but Hashem, much more clearly. Yesterday we could have convinced ourselves that we can manage on our Hashem, no problem. I don't need to heal him for this. You know, I'll get better on my own. Hashem, no problem. I don't need the parking place. I found the spot on my own. No. Every single thing in our lives, we need Hashem now more than ever. And I think the world is waking up to this. And even the movement of great, what I'm going to call emotional dysfunction, where people want to identify in certain ways. And you can look at it and say, oh my goodness, what's going on in the world? So many people are making choices that are like frightening in a certain sense. That's like the unraveling of systems that we always knew to be true are just coming apart. But maybe even that is to say, you know, to remind ourselves that how we identify is important. It's not enough to be a Jew. We need to identify as a Jew. It's not enough to have an neshama. We want to identify as a carrier of Hashem's light, and that's the work. So yes, the gullus seems darker, but 100% absolutely, we are transitioning into Geula. That's what this is about. We are transitioning into a world that's hypersensitive to Hashem's absolute charge of this world and absolute, you know, and our absolute need to identify as who we are and to do the work that it takes to expose Hashem's truth and to be aligned with Hashem's truth. Because yesterday you could manage without it, today none of us could. You cannot be sane in today's world without spiritual work. It's just not possible. And a few years ago, people were more comfortable. You know, we were more comfortable. So this is a sign of Geula. Let's lean into Geula and speed up the process. Ask Hashem to speed up the process. But it is the beginning of definitely the transition into Geula, just as much as it is a descent into chaos. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. The need to put on those Geula glasses and believe that it's imminent. You know, when you know that you're coming to shore, you know, you're on an ocean and the captain says, we're coming close to shore. You look out of the window or you look out on deck and you're like, oh, I see a building. Oh, I see, that must be the building of the land we're approaching, you know? So we know Mashiach is coming. So now it's about looking out for the signs. Everything is a sign. The question is how we're going to interpret it, you know? But thank you so much for sharing that. It was very, very meaningful. I think that functioning out of fear is not sustainable.
No.
Ultimately, the stress wears us down. It makes us angry people, makes us irritable people, and makes us people that are difficult to be around. So anything that we do from a place of fear is ultimately either we're going to burn ourselves out or burn out the people around us, because it's not a healthy emotion.
Yes.
It's not even holy. There's nothing holy about it, because holiness, as defined in the Tanya, is the place where Hashem is revealed. Holiness is where Hashem's presence is welcomed. Holiness is we are not separate from Hashem. We're one with Hashem. That's holiness. That's Kedusha. Kedusha is when we recognize that we're not alone and we're not on our own. That's Kedusha. Fear is what's going to happen to me. I am separate from Hashem. What's going to happen to me as someone who's so far from Hashem, as someone who's separate from Hashem? There's no Kedusha in that. That's not Kedusha. It's the opposite of Kedusha. At the same time, it's very much part of what I would call the spiritual dysfunction of the world. You know, just like shame, we look at ourselves and we say, I'm not good enough. And we think that that's holy. Really, that's the opposite of holy. Because how could you insult Hashem? What do you mean you're not good enough? You're a part of Hashem himself. You're beautiful. You're good. You're wonderful. Okay, you have to do something different, so do it. But that's not who you are. It's something that you have to do, not who you are. Two different things. It's part of our dysfunction that we take something that's so unhealthy or so unholy and we call it holy. Very much part of our culture, but it's changing. Thank you for bringing that to everybody's attention, because it's a very important thing to look out for. And that's also our Yetzer Hara hijacks it. You know, the thought that Mashiach is coming should be exciting, but the Yetzer Hara hijacks it and says, go hide, go run away from yourself. You're not good enough. You don't belong. You're not going to be included. Okay, thank you everybody for joining. And I really, really am looking forward to a couple of weeks, to being in touch in a couple of weeks. And I am very excited. I can't wait to share that there's good news about the book and that this book is being born. So I will keep you posted. Thank you so much for sharing the journey and being part of this beautiful group, creating this beautiful group where we can all grow and share and inspire each other and hold on to each other, literally hold hands as we walk into the Geula. Thank you again.